Why do we write stories? I don't mean what personally drives you as an author, although that's certainly an important topic to consider, but I mean, what's the point of storytelling? Why do human beings naturally tell stories to each other? Why are we fascinated so much by stories? And is there supposed to be a point to stories? Or is it just supposed to be an enjoyable way to spend our time? If you want to be a skilled and successful author, you need to understand what the purpose of storytelling is. And as a Christian author, you need to understand what it means to write these stories well from a Christian perspective. What does it mean to honor God with our storytelling? And these are really big questions to answer. And you may be surprised to learn that one of the best answers to these questions comes from a pagan poet who lived over 2,000 years ago. Today, I want to talk about the purpose of storytelling and what it means to write a meaningful, enjoyable story. This whole mini-course will be teaching you the basic mechanics of theme and how to create a good theme for your story. But you can only do all this when you first understand why a theme is important. And you can only understand why a theme is important when you first understand the purpose of storytelling. So with that, let's jump into our time machine and go back 2,000 years to learn what an old Roman poet can teach us about storytelling. The guy you're seeing on the screen right now is the Roman poet Quintus Horatius Flaccus. We'll call him Horace for short. He looks like a rather serious guy, doesn't he? In 19 BC, he wrote a letter called Ars Poetica, or what we know in English as the Art of Poetry. In my opinion, this is one of the most important works on storytelling ever written. In the middle of the letter, he writes the following about the purpose of storytelling. Poets wish to benefit or to please, or to speak what is both enjoyable and helpful to living. This is huge. It's hard for me to overstate how important Horace's idea here is. In this letter, Horace introduces a concept of what has been later been termed the teach and delight principle of literature. In case it wasn't clear enough from the quotation, Horace here argues that there's two aspects to good literature. Literature needs to teach, and literature needs to delight. This central idea that Horace provides us is huge, and many writers throughout the past 2 millennia have picked up on it and developed it further. You may be wondering, though, as a Christian author, if this is really a biblical concept. Horace was a pagan poet, after all. It's great that he thinks this, but does the Bible have anything to say about this teach and delight principle? I actually think it does. In Ecclesiastes 12:10, Solomon is describing his epiphany that life only has meaning when God is a part of it. Referring to himself as a preacher, he describes his actions as follows. The preacher sought to find words of delight, and uprightly he wrote words of truth. This, of course, is in the context of Proverbs and not of stories, but look what we have here. Words of delight and words of truth. This sounds a lot like that teach and delight principle we see in Horace. But this isn't only true for the Proverbs in the Bible. Look at all the stories that are told in the Bible as well. Stories like Moses parting the Red Sea, Esther saving the Jews, or the parable of the prodigal son. All of these stories are delightfully entertaining. There's a reason we enjoy reading them. And yet they also have a very clear didactic element. The story of Moses parting the Red Sea teaches us the importance of faith. The story of Esther saving the Jews shows us the importance of standing up for our beliefs. And the parable of the prodigal son reveals to us the love that God has for his children. These principles are powerful because they are combined with delightful storytelling. And I think this is one of the reasons the Bible is largely a collection of stories and poems, instead of being written like a systematic theology textbook. Stories are powerful because they can not only engage the human soul, but they instruct and challenge it as well. Horace understood this principle well, and this is why his articulation of it is so important. When we understand that the purpose of storytelling is to teach and delight, we have the first ingredient we need to write good stories ourselves. But maybe you're not quite convinced. So let's consider what literature looks like if it lacks one of these elements. What if you're afraid of sounding preachy, so you drop the instructional aspect? Or you don't see the purpose of hiding instruction in a distracting story, so you drop off the delight aspect? Well, the problem with this is twofold. If you drop the delight aspect and focus solely on instructing the reader, then you don't have a story, you have a sermon. And a story that is trying to be a sermon is neither a good story nor a good sermon. This, in my opinion, is the reason that many Christian stories fail. They're trying so hard to get their message across that they fail to actually deliver an entertaining story. I can sympathize with the temptation that authors face. It's easy to care so much about influencing our readers with the truth that we just try to pack as much moral instruction into our stories as possible. But if we imbalance instruction from delight, we overwhelm the reader with preaching, and the story sags and breaks under the weight of it. And we don't want that. So it's a big problem to focus on instruction over delight. But what if we focus on delight over instruction? This problem may be a bit less obvious than the former problem, but it's actually just as dangerous. If we tell a story that is engaging and interesting but lacks any component of instruction, then what we've really just read is escapist literature. Entertainment that's devoid of any real value isn't the worst thing ever, but it isn't great either, and it's likely going to be forgettable. Christian author Flannery O'Connor described good writing as follows: "I'm always highly irritated by people who imply that writing fiction is an escape from reality. It is a plunge into reality. Great stories are therefore those which both teach and delight." But this leads to a question. It may be clear how stories naturally delight, but how do we write stories that teach without becoming preachy or annoying? Or, to put it another way, how do we fulfill the purpose of storytelling? This is where the concept of theme needs to come in, because understanding theme is essential to writing great stories like this. This may lead to a question on your parts. What is theme? After all, the concept is thrown around a lot in writing circles, but it isn't always clearly defined, and not everyone uses the same definition. I'd like to propose that theme is an important topic or idea that the moral aspect of a story addresses. What's important about this definition is what theme isn't. So theme isn't a moral command, and it doesn't necessarily have a moral point. It's simply a topic. So, for example, these would be examples of possible themes: adolescence, the enduring nature of love, perseverance through adversity, the regrets of old age, and fear. These would not be examples of theme. Only by persevering through adversity can we achieve the dreams we aspire toward, or live wisely when you're young so you don't regret your life choices in old age. As you can see, both of these sentences are trying to make a moral point. Because of that, they can't be a novel's theme, because a novel's theme is only a topic, not a moral point. Both of these sentences are actually examples of a story's message. What's a story's message? That's a great question. A story's message is the expression of the author's worldview with regards to the thematic matter. Another, maybe simpler way of putting it, is that it's the moral point of the story. The theme will set up the moral topic in question of your novel, and the message will then display your proposed answer to your novel's theme. What you'll find is that a well-executed theme with its corresponding message not only improves the instructional aspect of your story, which may seem kind of obvious, but it also improves the entertainment value of your story as well. After all, there are few things more enjoyable than reading a really good book that also makes some really thoughtful points. To fulfill the purpose of storytelling, then, it is essential that you first understand theme. This therefore leads to an important question. How do you understand theme? Well, that's what this course is going to cover. In the next lesson, we'll talk about how to choose a good theme and message for your story. But in the meantime, I want you to think about your favorite story and consider what themes that story may have had. What moral topics did it cover? And why is it that it executed those themes so well? The more you analyze other stories to learn why their themes work, the better you'll be at understanding how to make a workable theme for your story as well. After you've thought about that and learned what you can learn from that story, you'll be ready to move on to the next lesson, where we'll tackle how to choose a good theme and message for your story, and also talk about the number one reason that themes can become unbearably preachy. I'm looking forward to seeing you there.